All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you had a good break. And with that break, I want us all to bring back to the topic of Agentic AI, which is what we were discussing, I think, all day long. So I'm Archana Deshpande, and I lead enterprise architecture, data, and services for Qualcomm. And I'm here to talk about data management in the age of AI, but specifically, what does that really mean for large enterprises? Many of the things that I'm about to discuss, I'm sure this is going to be a repetition. So I'll try to create a distinction and hopefully give you some different perspectives as we go along. So first of all, I think the vision we all can relate to. The rise of the agentic AI is already here. Now, I'm not going to ask how many of you have not used the agents, because I presume everybody over here has. But just by show of hands, how many have actually created custom agents as well? Okay. For the rest of us, I'm sure you'll be learning very soon, because that is the reality where it's not about us using the agents, but creating the agents as well. And as you're also hearing, AI agents are not just tools anymore, right? They are actually becoming collaborators and our teammates as well. But what's also new and emerging is the edge as a new frontier. You've, of course, seen cars. We all drive electric cars over here. But think about laptops, right? AI processing is getting more and more enabled on the laptops. But think about larger enterprises and different industry sectors. I'm going to give you a few examples of oil and gas, but think about industrial IoT and how the processing and the sensors are getting more AI enabled as well. So the usual traditional boundaries of centralized system processing are actually expanding, and it is about enabling ubiquitous AI everywhere. So that's really a trend fast emerging. And of course, lastly, you all are hearing the term orchestration a lot today. Orchestration is not just about the AI agents and how AI agents orchestrate amongst themselves, but it is an orchestration across the different stack and the value chain. So think about, in an enterprise ecosystem, think about the infrastructure, the network, the application, the data platforms. Orchestration is happening across the board as well. So the success is really going to be dependent on how we manage the data throughout that value chain, but essentially shifting the focus from data management to more towards driving data actions. So what does that mean? I think we all had been, this was a few years ago, we used to talk data is the new fuel, data is the new fuel. And I think where we are now, obviously data is the one that is going to be fueling the new AI generation that we are about to launch and that we're already seeing. So what does it really mean? I think data, the state of data management, is not just about retrieval and storage anymore. It's not about data being static anymore. It is about data driving actions. And for it to be able to drive actions, it means that data has to be accessible through any programmatic interfaces that the agentic systems can interact and engage with. I think we've been talking about the discoverability of the data a lot. We've been talking about contextual significance of what it means for the data. And all of this is really because the agentic systems, the more data discoverable that is, the more they can access the data. That's how they will be able to orchestrate. I think Joe touched upon the semantic layer. The nature of semantic layer and the construct of the semantic layer are actually honestly even extending beyond BI now, right? We're hearing about Gen BI use cases. How you model the semantic layer has to now support a variety of various omni-channel use cases, but more importantly, agentic systems as they orchestrate the workflow and as they have to interact with more of the data sets and the semantic layer. So that is constantly evolving, and how that interoperates with MCP is something that is also going to be critical going forward. Curation, for those who have started the journey on modern lake houses, and who have tried to accelerate the journey by lifting and shifting, your legacy gold tier, are perhaps now realizing the missed step around curation and how important curation is. And the reason, again, is, as you've been hearing all along, the metadata, the labeling, the context, and the reasoning. Today, there's a lot of manual work that goes into it. But where we are headed, it's the agentic systems doing the auto-curation themselves, right? So that's also going to be an important factor as we really think about agents doing some of the data management work themselves. And finally, governance is really a key topic you heard across as well on as the agents orchestrate. How do you really govern the data, but how do you govern the agents as well? And more importantly, with the ease with which anyone can build an agent and deploy the agent. We are not just talking about governance of data, but governance of agents that are created by anyone in the workplace. So how do we shift from governance to guidance? And more importantly, shift from static policies to dynamic policies that can be applied based on the situation and based on the context as well. So those are the critical areas of governance on how that, again, right, this is what we envision would be changing as things evolve with agentic systems. So where will the data and agents be? I think it's no secret, they are everywhere. We just heard about GPUs and data centers driving the maturity, and now the GPU and that architecture is influencing all the way to how the solution should be architected. Larger organizations, again, take an example of, again, speaking about the fuel, right? You take large oil refineries. There are the refineries themselves, then there is the actual fuel pipelines that go through and through to the actual distribution centers, which is what takes the refined gas to the different gas stations. If you look at that kind of an ecosystem and the equivalent over here, you have data centers, you have cloud, and you also have now the edge devices. We spoke about AI processing on the edge, and obviously with that, the data is also following. And what that means is we are looking at distributed intelligence across this entire ecosystem because the computing is going to be different for the different types of use cases that we are seeing over here as well. So it's about the distributed intelligence, and while AI agents might be operating in a siloed manner for now on each of these different compute nodes, they are going to be more and more increasingly be seamlessly operating across the different types of ecosystem over here. As the data moves to the edge for processing, observability has to follow the data, right? And the visibility of the data has to go beyond the boundary of the centralized ecosystem or centralized platform to honestly to every node on the edge, which is where the processing is happening. So this is also going to be critical because we were just talking about, the trust and the lineage and traceability. And if we don't follow the entire data value chain, which is, again, all the way from origin to where it actually gets processed, this is going to be super critical. And of course, we also learned a lot about context. As the AI agents work seamlessly across the 3 different type of computes that are listed over here, making sure that the context is also followed through is only going to be able to make the orchestration and decision-making even more smoother. Because end of the day, what we really would be looking for is a cohesive, coordinated set of actions that happen across these various diverse environments. So data management as such, obviously we are saying, has evolved and will continue to evolve. But the theme really you're starting to hear is data management is not just about how we manage the data lifecycle. That is obviously still very important, but essentially how we are also enabling the agentic systems to take action on the data. That really is a key shift. But at the same time, we are also talking about the agentic ecosystem driving some actions and doing the work autonomously as well, right? So think about the role of a data steward. How would the role of a data steward change if we are saying the governance itself becomes very dynamic and the policies become self-applied? Are they just going to be agent supervisors instead? Or are they really going to also be responsible for orchestrating the decision process, especially as the complexity of agents increases and we still need human in the loop to be able to monitor the overall process? Speaking of human in the loop, I think we are already seeing the progression from, being totally human-led to human in the loop participation to human over the loop, and potentially some of the processes moving with human out of the loop. And I think this is a shift that is happening where we want the autonomous execution of some of the processes, but what that also means is teams will need to start trusting the AI outputs more and more. And I know I can give just a personal example, though it was not an AI agent, but I was recently using extensively the various GPTs for college search for my daughter. And it gave me such super comparison between all the different colleges that I was looking at. I didn't have to go and trust and verify, which is what I would do usually 6 months ago. So I think it's just an evolution that we would need to start trusting the outputs more and more, because the reality is the human over the loop and potentially human out of the loop is soon going to be a reality for some of the processes, given again the rate of innovation. We already spoke about real-time governance, and borrowing the analogy of the refineries again, think about the sensors that carry the fuel from within the pipelines and the need for alert to go off based on certain threshold levels about some leaks or about some toxicity that they detect. Those levels could be different based on different regions, different countries. But for agents that are going to be deployed on the sensors to be able to generate those alerts, they need to dynamically detect what the policy is based on their location and based on, of course, the parameters that have been set up to then be able to govern themselves. So governance is also going to become more and more programmatically. We were talking about security. So this is also going to be about self-governance and how agents eventually can become smarter to be able to do that. And lastly, there's a very interesting conversation in the last panel around, the role of a software engineer and, do we really need to learn all the code, or should the software tell us what needs to be done? What about data engineers? I think the reality is with the use of, at least the GPT and agents, the skills are getting leveled, right? There is a low barrier as well to understanding new skills. And what that means is as skills become more general, there is going to be even more blending of different skills that will happen. And in fact, I just learned recently some of the leaders who are embracing an AI-first approach are already starting to make organizational changes at the very top. So Moderna is an example. Their chief people officer is now a chief digital officer as well. Because why? Because agents are, again, as we are hearing, are digital workers, and digital workers need to coexist with the human capital that they have as well. So that trend is already starting to see, especially with the leaders. There's another example where a CTO is now overseeing some of the people operations as well. So as the barrier to the skills and the expertise gets lower, and as there is more of a leveling, there will be more blending of such roles as well that will happen. So this is just an organizational convergence. That is something that will be very interesting to see how that evolves into. Just in terms of just the additional call outs, then I think as we look at more like the edge evolution, and as more and more AI processing and hence the data processing that happens on the edge, the need for self-enforcement is something that we've already discussed. Now, obviously, for the enforcement to happen, we speak about the underlying, of course, the quality, the lineage, the traceability, the policies. And think about in today's world, the amount of time that we can really spend in making sure that the value chain really happens in the right way. We were just hearing around larger organizations, the complexity is super high, right? And when you think about the number of data lakes that they're managing or the number of data foundations that they have, the need for us to manage this in a more automated manner is really going to be something to watch out for going forward, especially with the agents that are now, starting to do a lot of work themselves. And also they have to be context aware. So how do we really thread the data needle through the different compute nodes, through the different data ecosystem is again going to be important. Today, of course, we have catalogs and we have potentially even observability trying to enrich that, but it doesn't go across the different environments to where the data is residing. So I think that is something that's going to be super critical, but also important is self-governance again, and application, honestly, of some of those policies themselves. Agent-first design is an interesting one. And I don't know how many of you have started to figure out, this was perhaps 6 months ago, right? When Gen AI came and then Agentic AI came, and then everyone was scrambling to figure out, hey, what's the first use case that we should really try and implement, right? And the natural reaction was, let's take an existing process where we have bottlenecks and let's try to automate that with the use of AI. But that original process that we are now trying to automate was designed for humans to begin with, right? So obviously the bottlenecks that exist, at some point, the agents will also inherit it. So as we think about, the future, I think it would be really critical to rethink about an agent-first approach and see if that does anything differently to the process and even the systems, right? And even the platforms that we are starting to wire together. This also represents a fundamental thinking in terms of, we all have been trained on the design thinking approaches and what does it mean for your user research and how we should take the interviews and the feedback and account for the usability. That paradigm now needs to extend to agents as well, right? Except that the humans, again, are either in the loop or over the loop or even out of the loop. So I think reimagining our entire processes, including our software development practices, which we just heard in the prior session, is going to be super critical as well to see how do we think about that agent-first mindset. As we also think about the agent-first, we also know that the need for the human and the agent to coexist is always going to be there. The beauty about the agentic architecture is they can really scale very well. Not only can they amplify, the capabilities, but they actually solve for complexities as well, right? So think about the ecosystem where, again, in large enterprises, where there are multiple data lakes and data foundation and applications and platforms. As the processes get more and more complex, and as leaders here, imagine all the scaling as it relates to the talent, as it relates to, the various integrations and automations that we need to put in place today. If agents are going to be able to do that for us, their ability to scale is going to be far more broader than humans alone. But what that means is it would be the responsibility for the human capital to oversee the intent and, more importantly, the ethics, right? End of the day, we still know that we would need to coexist in some of the cases for decision making. So how do we allow the agents to be more autonomous, but at the same time, we focus our efforts on overseeing the intent, and ethics is going to be critical. And finally, the talent evolution. We did talk about the organizational convergence, but when you really start thinking about, as you have new graduates who will be joining the workforce and they come with their own agents, or they at least have an awareness of building their own agents. As more and more agents get deployed and as we start treating them as, our collaborators and teammates, what does this do to the organizational structure? Do we think that agents can potentially supervise junior level talent as well? What does it do to the accountability that exists? How should we be thinking about skills? Skills for which, obviously, the skills and the expertise gap that we have and the entire, compensation, career planning, talent planning, everything that is based on that. If that equation itself starts to change, how should we be thinking about our organizational model going forward? So there are a ton of those considerations that definitely will, again, come in play. And like I said, few companies who are actually leading that are already thinking about that already. But there's a lot in here. Again, this place is very rapidly evolving, and who knows what we are going to be discussing or what we are going to be going through in the next 6 months or so. But what is really important is we are not just talking technology. This technology is really going to be having an impact on the operating model that was referenced before, because how we do strategy, how we do execution, and how do we manage our overall talent workforce is all also going to change. So that is something that is really critical for us to, again, have a watch area on. So in a nutshell, there's a lot that's happening. The pace of innovation is rapid. And I think as leaders and professionals, I think it would be super critical, again, to be extremely hands-on, right? Because being hands-on, both creation as well as the consumption side, it actually helps us filter the noise as well. There's a lot of noise, honestly, right now. And unless you do it, you wouldn't really know what the reality is. It also helps you understand the impact on the human side and the talent landscape that we just discussed. But more importantly, it also helps us to create and draft very thoughtful strategies and tactics and evolve, more importantly, because I don't think anyone has figured out yet on how to even set themselves up for a change that's coming like this. But being actively involved definitely helps come up with more thoughtful and creative strategies to then embrace the changes as and when they occur. So with that, I'm hoping that, we continue this conversation, and not just here, but, outside as well. And hopefully we all come to the realization that what's ahead of us is definitely going to have a profound impact. And profound impact, again, not just from a technology perspective, but profound impact on the overall organizations as well. And more importantly, its transformational capabilities. Now, I have to admit, I did create my first agent a few weeks ago, and it was actually very easy to do so. But before I end, I just want to leave you with a small, quick co-pilot agent that I wanted to use to just summarize this presentation, and this is what it had to say. So with that, thank you.